Welcome to The Joyful Alchemist, the podcast where transformation meets inspiration. I'm Lynn Falconer, your guide on this journey of turning life's ordinary moments into extraordinary magic. Here we dive deep into personal growth, spiritual insights, and practical tools to help you unlock joy, purpose, and abundance. Whether you're seeking clarity, courage, or connection, this is your space to explore, evolve, and embrace the alchemy of joyful living. Let's ignite transformation, one powerful conversation at a time. During the past week, we read through the book of Genesis, chapters 1 through 17. These chapters cover foundational events in biblical history, beginning with the creation of the world and humanity, moving through the fall of mankind, and detailing the genealogy from Adam to Noah. They also recount the story of the great flood, the repopulation of the earth, and the calling of Abram, who later becomes Abraham, culminating in his blessing by Melchizedek. Now, this episode will summarize the key events in these chapters, provide some reflections, and then we will also take a look at their relevance to modern life. So we start out with the creation and the fall of man. Genesis begins with God creating the heavens and the earth, reference Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Over 6 days, God forms light, sky, land, vegetation, stars, animals, and finally mankind in his image. And the passage from Genesis chapter 1:27 goes as follows. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. Then we go on and we learn that God places Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, a paradise filled with every good thing. However, they are given one commandment, and you find this in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 through 17. The verses read, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." Now, tempted by the serpent, Eve eats the forbidden fruit and gives some of it to Adam. Their disobedience leads to their expulsion from Eden. You can read about that in Genesis chapter 3, verses 23 through 24. And the introduction of sin and death then comes into the world. Next we move to the stories of Cain, Abel, and Seth, and this is in Genesis chapters 4 through 5. Adam and Eve's sons, Cain and Abel, bring offerings to God. Abel's offering pleases God, but Cain's offering does not, leading Cain to kill Abel out of jealousy. That is written in Genesis chapter 4, verse 8. God then punishes Cain by making him a wanderer, though he marks him to prevent others from killing him. And in Genesis chapter 4, verse 15, we read the following, "But the Lord said to him, Not so. Anyone who kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Let's now take a look and ask the question, why was Cain's offering rejected? While Genesis does not explicitly state why Cain's offering was rejected, several insights help shed light on the issue. First of all, we can look at the quality of the offering. Abel offered the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions, and that's written in Genesis chapter 4, verse 4, which demonstrated giving the best and most valuable part of his possessions. Cain's offering of some fruits of the soil, written in Genesis chapter 4, verse 3, lacks the emphasis on quality or sacrifice, suggesting it may not have been first fruits or the best of his harvest. And then if we look at attitude and faith, in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 4, it clarifies that Abel's offering was accepted because it was presented by faith. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offering. Cain's offering, lacking faith, might have been given out of obligation rather than devotion. And if we look at the type of offering, some scholars point to the fact that Abel's offering involved blood sacrifice, which symbolizes atonement for sin. And we can read that in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22. Cain's grain offering may have lacked that element, though grain offerings were later acceptable under Mosaic law. And then there is also the condition of heart. God's words to Cain in Genesis chapter 4 verse 7 suggest the rejection was related to Cain's disobedience or improper heart attitude. God's words were, "If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." Now Cain's subsequent anger and murder of Abel confirmed that his heart was already tainted by jealousy and pride. So the modern application of Cain and Abel's story goes to this: examine intentions in worship. This story reminds us to evaluate our values when serving or giving to God. True worship requires faith and humility rather than empty rituals. Also, guard against jealousy. Cain's envy led to destructive actions. We are encouraged to celebrate our successes as well as the successes of others rather than harbor resentment. And then overcoming sin through obedience. God warns Cain about sin's desire to control him, highlighting the importance of recognizing temptations and ruling over them through faith and discipline. Adam and Eve later have another son, Seth, through whom the godly lineage continues. And you can read about that in Genesis chapter 4, verses 25 through 26. Now, another event that we read about in the book of Genesis, in chapters 6 through 9, is Noah and the flood. As humanity multiplies, sin and wickedness increase, prompting God to cleanse the earth through a flood. However, Noah finds favor with God due to his righteousness. Genesis chapter 6, verse 8. God instructs Noah then to build an ark to save his family and pairs of animals. In Genesis chapter 6 verse 18 we read the following: "But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you." And after the flood waters subside, Noah worships God, and God establishes a covenant symbolized by the rainbow. And we can read the following in Genesis chapter 9 verse 13. God said, "I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth." Then in Genesis chapter 11, we read about the Tower of Babel. Humanity unites to build a tower to reach the heavens, defying God's command to spread across the earth, which is stated in Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. In response, God confuses their language, causing them to scatter. In Genesis chapter 11, verse 9, we read the following: "That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world." Then we read about Abram's calling and covenant with God. And this is in Genesis chapters 12 through 17. So God calls Abram, later renamed Abraham, to leave his homeland and promises to make him into a great nation. In Genesis chapter 12 verse 2 we read, "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." Abram demonstrates faith by obeying God, yet he struggles at times, such as the time in Egypt when he pretends Sarah is his sister to avoid danger. You can read about that in Genesis chapter 12, verses 10 through 20. God later makes a covenant with Abram, promising him descendants as numerous as the stars. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 5, we read the following: "Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, so shall your offspring be." This promise is solidified when Melchizedek, king of Salem, blesses Abram, recognizing his favor with God. And you can read about that in Genesis chapter 14, verses 18 through 20. Now, if we take a look at lessons and modern applications of the text in the chapters 1 through 17 of the book of Genesis, we can first go to faith and obedience. Abraham's faith reminds us of the importance of trusting God and trusting God's promises even when they seem impossible. We must also take account of the consequences of sin. The fall of Adam and Eve highlights how disobedience can lead to separation from God and hardships. And then there is redemption and grace. God's covenant with Noah and with Abraham demonstrates his willingness to extend mercy and build new beginnings. Then we have unity and division. The Tower of Babel teaches the value of humility and the dangers of prideful ambition. And righteous living. Noah's example inspires us to live righteously in a corrupt world, trusting in God's guidance. Now, I also have some activities that you can partake in. Create a reflection journal. On a daily basis, write in a journal, reflecting on each day of creation. Consider how each step of creation relates to aspects of your own life and how it inspires gratitude as well as stewardship of the earth. A faith walk challenge. Choose a goal or prayer to trust God with for 1 week. Document your faith, document your journey, and reflect on challenges and growth as inspired by Abraham's obedience. Family covenant activity. I encourage you to create a family or personal covenant, similar to God's covenant with Noah and Abraham. Write down commitments to faith, unity, and trust in God, and display it as a reminder of your promises. Now, in summary, the chapters 1 through 17 of the book of Genesis lays the foundation for understanding creation, sin, judgment, redemption, and covenant. It also reveals God's sovereignty, justice, and grace while foreshadowing themes that continue throughout Scripture. In today's modern world, readers and listeners can draw lessons from faith, obedience, humility, as well as God's unwavering commitment to His promises. Now, by reflecting on these events, we are reminded to live lives that honor God, trust in His plans, and strive for righteousness. Thank you for joining me on The Joyful Alchemist, where transformation and joy collide. If today's episode inspired you, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of magic. Keep shining, keep growing, and remember, you have the power to turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. Until next time, stay joyful and keep alchemizing your dreams into reality.